I will go ahead and get started. Greetings, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Kyle, Director of Alumni and Family Engagement here at Pitzer. Welcome back to another special presentation of Stay at Home with Pitzer College Art Galleries. As always, it's so nice to see so many returning faces, but if you're here with us for the first time, we so appreciate you joining us this afternoon. This original collaboration with the Office of Alumni and Family Engagement and Pitzer College Art Galleries was created to try to find new and innovative ways to keep our community connected during the time of social distancing. We're so pleased to bring you the 5th iteration of our summer series, where we'll be highlighting the work of alumni artist Julia White, class of 1990, who will be exploring landscape and psychologically charged scene paintings. Each of our summer series lectures are facilitated by our multi-talented curator, Kiara Ennis, who has both been our curator and director of Pitzer College Art Gallery since 2007. We continue to be incredibly grateful to both her and her colleague Chris for their willingness to partner with the Office of Advancement on this very special series of talks. With that said, I'd like to introduce you to Kiara Ennis.
Thank you very much, Brandon, for that lovely introduction. And I'd also, of course, very much like to thank you and the Office of Alumni and Family Engagement for partnering with us. And of course, I'd like to give a very, very special thanks to Chris Michno, Exhibitions and Communications Manager at Pitzer College Art Galleries, for his help in coordinating and promoting these very special events. And a huge thanks to everybody for being with us today. Thrilled to see you all. During this series, we have been featuring painters, sculptors, filmmakers, and curators that have graduated from Pitzer throughout the last 30 years or so. Today, we have the very great pleasure of connecting with Julia White, who is a painter based in Tacoma, Washington. Julia graduated from Pitzer in 1990 with a BA in psychology and art, and has been practicing as an artist ever since. Additionally, Julia studied scientific illustration at the University of Washington. Today, Julia will be discussing a fascinating project that she is currently working on titled The Museum of Bad Judgment. This body of work is loosely based on her grandfather's newspaper clippings and journal accounts of murder cases that he worked on as an attorney in Oregon during the years 1930 to 1960. The resulting paintings use both objective and subjective prompts as starting point for exploring themes of memory and loss. Julia will speak for about 50 minutes, after which there will be time for questions. If you would like to ask something, please send it to me via chat and I will pass it along to Julia when the time comes. So again, please join me in giving Julia White a huge welcome from all of us. Thank you, Julia. And I will go ahead and mute myself now.
Okay, great. And I'll go ahead and share my screen and start my slides here. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. So thanks to Kiara and Christopher for the opportunity to speak about my paintings and about my work. And that was a great introduction. That was a great way to describe the Museum of Bad Judgment. And what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about my paintings leading up to that, and then talk about that project. So, and sort of see how the evolution came together. But this first slide is, and I also want to thank Sean. I don't know if he's here, but Sean Kavanaugh. He did this a few weeks ago, did the Pitzer at Home artist talk, and he did a great job and kind of put the bug in their ear to have me do this, which I was happy to do. So great way to connect with other Pitzer people. So this first slide is just pre-Pitzer. It's me in high school as a high school painter, and then the picture next to it is my high school art teacher, and her name was Heidi, and she was the first person that really kind of put that spark into me to just kind of go for it as a painter. And she was just wonderful. She's standing there in the bell bottoms. And so I've just been thinking about her a lot lately, and I found this photograph of her. So I feel like my style is partially due to her and the foundation she gave me. And so that's my little tribute to Heidi. And this is my tribute to Pitzer. It's my bulletin board in Sanborn Hall, I believe, during my senior year. And I've got the typewriter and my cassette player, and I think this little baby doll in the corner, he has a stick of incense in his mouth, and so it just seemed like a very Pitzer scene. So I just found this recently, so I was able to share it with you guys. I have a few slides of my senior show at Pitzer. This was down in that gallery that was in the basement of McConnell Hall. And I did most of my painting at Scripps. I took most of my painting courses at Scripps, mostly because of the facilities there. They had great studios for painters. And I think the Pitzer art program is different now, and there's probably better spaces for painters. But at that point, I just had better space there. But for this show, Michael Woodcock was my advisor, and so I became close with him that last year, and that I was at Pitzer. And he's another one of these teachers in my life that really kind of opened these doors of curiosity and kind of pushed me beyond my limits and gave me more confidence. And so these paintings were they were cut out of plywood, and then I adhered canvas to them and painted them, and they were big. This was kind of the main piece in the show, and this wolf was about 9 feet long, and they stood about about 3 inches off the wall, and so they created kind of a neat shadow. And I believe these were acrylic, but when I look at this earth sort of looks to me like I did it in encaustic, and so it might be an oil, but it was so long ago I can't quite remember what my medium was. But and these are also scanned from 35 millimeter slides, which weren't great to begin with. So excuse the quality of the slides here. Let's see. The next one is from that same show. It's a cat, very tall. You can kind of see a little outlet on the floor there to kind of get an idea of the size. But again, he's a cutout shape. And then a woman that was about the same dimensions, about 9 feet tall. And so that was my senior show at Pitzer. And I was very proud of those pieces and worked really hard, and then got out of school, and sort of the reality of painting and trying to work and live in an apartment kind of dawned on me. But I was able to create some work and kind of keep this sort of spirit going in me. And this was one of the first paintings I did when I moved to Seattle. And this was called White Bear's Story, and it's on a piece of found wood. It's a big, thick piece of wood that was bolted to some other wood, and in kind of these neat double windows. And I typically painted on found objects at that time because I didn't have a lot of room nor money to buy supplies, so I painted on a lot of found wood. But this is another painting from around that time, around 1991, and it was, I just like this. I still have this on my studio wall now, and it was done on some shelving that I got at Starbucks. I worked at Starbucks at the time, and but I like that deer, and that deer has reappeared in several of my paintings subsequently. But it's about 24 by 24 oil on panel. And some other animals. These were done on particle board, which is a terrible surface to paint on. But again, I was painting on found stuff, and also the slide cuts off this coyote's nose. His nose isn't usually cut off, but I think that these are in acrylic, pretty sure. And then I was starting to move into a slightly different style, and I included this because I felt like this showed kind of some more confidence as I was moving into my, you know, a little bit later into my career. I mean, this is probably about 5 years out of college, and but I felt like a lot of times I really overworked stuff. I just painted over and over things, I think, just to get it exactly right. But this, I had more confidence and just had very simple strokes, and I really liked the way this one turned out. And then this is kind of moving into reminiscent of my current style. I kind of paint more architecture, a lot of I paint a lot of motels I have over the years. And so this was kind of moving into that, but I still kept kind of the abstract kind of dreamlike quality. Here's a motel. This is a large painting. It's about 48 by 50 or so. And this was oil on canvas. And back then I was also sometimes I wasn't very careful about how I used my materials. So I had painted some layers on this, and then I painted this top layer that didn't adhere for some reason. I think I had too much solvent in it, and it began to chip off. And so I was able to kind of use that to my advantage because of this moody painting, and scrape off a lot of the painting and then repaint it and do some glazes on it. And it created this really neat effect. The slide doesn't quite do it justice, but one thing about it is the painting's very fragile, because I think there's probably some places that could chip off kind of easily. So ever since then, I've been a little bit more careful about my materials and what I use. This was from a couple of years later, but sort of along these themes of abandoned buildings, and I think this was from a picture of Sears. I call it Sears, and I've actually been revisiting doing some buildings like that. Just today, I've been working on kind of paintings of malls, particularly now because malls are really they're closing, and the future of malls is uncertain, and so I'm trying to do some paintings of them to kind of capture that, what's going on at this moment. Let's see. So this is called Arrival, and this was in 2002 that I did this, and kind of still with the buildings. I feel like I was getting a little bit more just confident with my colors, and just sometimes I remember doing this painting and I just had one dog in there, and then I was like, I need more dogs, and so I put more in it, and it was just how I needed it. Let's see. And so for a while I got away from having animals in my paintings, but then I started getting back to them. And this one's called Long Beach. A lot of my paintings, if I can't think of a name, I'll just name them after a place. And I think I thought that there was a pier in Long Beach, California. I'm not sure if there is, but I named it Long Beach after that. But and then this is that blue deer again. And this is oil on canvas. It's fairly large, about 54 inches tall by about 48 wide or so. At this time I was working I lived in Seattle, and I was working just south of Seattle in an office building just south of Boeing. And so I would drive past the Boeing field every day pretty much. And so this was sort of, I included this one just because it was sort of a way that even though I was working full time and I didn't have a ton of time to paint, I still did it, and I kind of integrated my work life into my painting life, and this is what came out. And I included this one. This one is a lot of times I work with photographs, but I won't. I'll just take just the idea from a photograph. I'll just steal an element. This was from a photograph of my that I found in my grandmother's stuff. And, you know, I think that there were 2 women in it and there was a table. And so it was something like that. But I added all the rest of the stuff. And this was oil on panel. But I added these pots and all the flowers and stuff. And I'm just not sure exactly where they came from, but they seem to work. That one's called Lake Oswego. And the River Girls, I did 3 of these paintings of girls sitting by a river. I spent a lot of time on a river in Oregon during the summers, or I was at that point. And so I did these kind of evocative paintings. There's not really a story behind them, but I just like paintings that you could put a story behind them. Not like the paintings I'm working on now that have a really definite story behind them. And let's see, this is I forget the name of this one, but this was done, I think in the early 2000s, and I was spending a lot of time going to the coast, out to the Washington and Oregon coast, and I was always struck by these little towns that aren't quite at the coast, they're a little bit inland. And so this was sort of a tribute to one of those little towns. And again, it looks like it's telling a story, but it's really just you know, kind of a part of a story in my mind, is how as far as I would get with these. And another River Girl. This is sort of based on the river that we spend a lot of time at. We have a cabin at, but and it came out to be a pretty haunting picture, but and it's oil on board, I believe. That one's called The Swimmer. So this is kind of, I think I did this in about 2003, and so I've been out of college for about 13 years, and I was getting a little bit just a little bit stalled in my artistic career. I was still doing it, but I was feeling a little bit you know, I guess stalled would be the best word for it. And so that's when I decided to enroll in the scientific illustration course it was a certificate program at the University of Washington. And so the next few slides are really different because it's from that program. And it was a 9-month program. It was pretty intensive, you know, long, you know, like 4 nights a week. And it was rigorous because of the content was very precise and really different from what I was used to. But I did do it, and you know, I never pursued it professionally. I was thinking that I would, and because there are, even in this digital age, there is room for, you know, hand illustrated scientific content out there. I think there still is. I didn't pursue it professionally, but the program, I think the program was definitely worthwhile because it taught me to see in a better way, or a different way. And it gave me confidence in my drawing. Like this drawing here was, it's a method called carbon dusting. I believe that was the name. And it's a chicken skull and a muskrat skull. And they were to scale. I don't think the slide is to scale, but the drawing was, you know, double size. So that, you know, we had a little chicken skull and we had to draw it perfectly. And it was just very rigorous, and it almost drove me crazy, but I did it. And this is a wolf skeleton and colored pencil, and pretty precise for me, I think, but very different from what I had been doing. And this was a claw, and you know, I was always a little, you know, it might have just been the time in my life, but I was a little insecure about my abilities in the scientific illustration, because I felt like I wasn't precise enough to do it. And I was probably comparing myself to other people in my group because some people were very good at it. But now I look back on it and I sort of appreciate the way my style kind of melded into this scientific style, and you know, and what I I learned from that program. And this is I just found this drawing when I was getting ready for this, and that I don't know if I think I did this during that class because it was in the file with all the drawings, but I like it because I feel like it's really a good combo of this more precise drawing, but it really mixes well, melds well with my style with, these mountains and then this line. And so I feel like it was a good experience and informed my work from there. But then I went back kind of to these coastal sort of dreamy landscapes. And this was based on a kind of an abandoned school over in Washington coast. This was another kind of dreamy coastal one. This was from a photograph of my great-grandfather at the Oregon coast, and it's very stylized, obviously, but it was yeah, I remember trying to do it from this tiny faded black and white photo, but I really liked the way it turned out. And this one is called County Jail. And this one was based on, I had done this solo road trip sort of down in Oregon and through the California. I think I was in Northern California somewhere, and I saw this county jail, and I took a photo of it and then ended up painting it. And then I added these guys on the side that looked like they might have been these Old West criminals that were there. And I was kind of inspired by this illustrator named Joe Mora, who was active in California, I believe. It's Jomora, and he did these great illustrations that were sort of sectioned off with different content in them. And so that was sort of my copy of Joe Mora. And this was, I just added this one in because this was sort of an example of, it was at a time where I was a little bit at a low ebb with my painting again, but I did this painting by kind of copying myself. And like this railing, I had put in a lot of different paintings. This is a railing that is at the promenade in Seaside, Oregon, that I just put it in there. And these chairs, I think you probably saw those chairs in a painting earlier. So that was kind of my way to kind of get through sort of some slow times, as just, just kind of copy myself and keep painting. And this, I'm jumping ahead now to sort of this current time, and then I'm just going to talk a little bit more and then get into my current project. But I did go through a bunch of years where I didn't really finish any paintings. I was having this really frustrating time where I was just frustrated with paintings. I started a lot, I didn't finish a lot, I wasn't showing, and and just life stuff was happening. But there was one day, and I think I was complaining about it quite a bit. And one day I think I was complaining about it, and my husband said to me, he said, just make a painting, just do a painting. And so I went in and I made this little painting, and that was in 2016. And I dated it 2017, but I definitely did most of it in 2016. So I sort of feel like this was a kind of a gateway to this new, more productive period that I've had over the past, 3-4 years. And this was one of these ones that I didn't finish. I probably started this painting like 6 times and never could finish it. But finally, during that time, I did. And it's called In the Arboretum, and it's of the Arboretum at, here in Seattle, or I live in Tacoma, but up in Seattle. And I worked there for about 6 years. So that's this one. And this one was I was very into genealogy. And so this is one that in acrylic that I did during that time. And it's my 2 great grandmothers. It's one from one side, and then this is my other great grandmother's house. And then that little building that was in the previous painting is in the background there. So there's that one. And also around this time, this one's called 14 Kids. And around this time, in late 2017, a big thing happened in that I got a studio. I had never had a painting studio. I had always painted in rooms in my house or in the apartment. And but my husband built a studio on our property. It took us about 3 years to actually do it, but in the end of 2017, we finished it, and my productivity, and I'll show you some pictures at the end of the talk of the studio, but this is a painting that I started in the house. It's pretty small because I didn't have much room. It's on a found piece of board. This was an old cutting board that my husband found at a remodel he was doing, but then this is acrylic painting on it called 14 Kids. And let's see, this is one that I did in the new studio, and it's kind of a composite of a lot of different places I've been. And you know, the way I get these ideas is I sort of get the idea in my head, and that I wanted to do a painting of some dogs fighting, and so I, you know, sketch it out a little bit, but mostly I just put it on the canvas and work as I go, and work it out, which isn't a great way to work because sometimes it takes me way too long. But you know, and then as it develops, the painting kind of starts telling me the story, you know, telling me what to do. And you know, and as this one turned out, those dogs don't really look like they're fighting, but I like the way it turned out. And this one, I started it in the house and finished it in the studio, but it was based on a photograph of my friend's baby, and but I added, of course, I added the deer to it. That's my deer that comes back into my paintings, but this is was her baby sitting with a bucket, and then this is a sculpture that's in Tacoma, and her mom was looking at the sculpture. But I just always thought that was such a cool photograph, so I did this little painting of her, and it's called Ode to Edie, and it's on this odd size board. I had these canvas boards that were 15 by 30, which is kind of a funny long size. And this one it's a pretty recent painting, but it's one that's outside of my project, but it's from the end of 2019. And for about 5 years, I was working in a museum. And so I think I wanted to paint some kids in a museum. And what I originally wanted to do was to paint those minerals that glow in the dark. I don't know if you've seen those, and you go into a museum and the room's dark, but there's these glowing minerals. But I was trying to do that and it just wasn't working. So I decided just to make it a light museum of rocks and minerals. But I might do the glow in the dark ones another time. But this one's oil on canvas. It's big too. It's about 60 inches wide because now I have more space. And it's called We Were Kids. And then let's see. Okay, so here's going on to the Museum of Bad Judgment, and so this is a painting project that, as Kira told you, it's a series of paintings that are based on this, which is my and I have it right here too. It's a memoir, unpublished memoir called "Some Interesting Criminal Cases I Have Tried," and it was by my grandfather. He wrote it in 1983. His name was Bruce Spalding, and he was both a prosecutor and a defense attorney. And I didn't really know this existed. I mean, I knew that there were kind of sensational trials that he was involved in, but I didn't know he had written this until way after he died in 1990, and my grandmother died in 2002, and I didn't discover it until after that. But the memoir covers 8 murder cases, and that took place in Oregon, various towns. And the way he writes is super vivid and just visual for me. And then I also had some case files and some ephemera. So I just have some little pictures here of some stuff that I had, and a lot of newspaper clippings about them. So all of that together created a really vivid pictures for me for paintings. And I'm just going to read the intro to it right now. It's very quick, but I just think it sort of I just love it. And the intro says, "This effort is dedicated to my 2 daughters, Doris Helen Rosen and Jean White," who's my mom, wife of Gary White, who's my dad, "who have over the years attended my more interesting trials and made many helpful suggestions to me. They both also encouraged me to write my memoirs about these trials before the details are all forgotten. These details are all as fresh in my memory as though they happened last month. And he actually came down with Alzheimer's and probably about the year after that, because he had Alzheimer's for about 5 or 6 years. So, you know, it just also, you know, represents loss and memory. And I'm just so glad he wrote them down. And the reason I call it the Museum of Bad Judgment is that just occurred to me at one point, and I feel like it opened me up creatively, because what I'm doing is I kind of get into the small parts of these stories and the people in them. And so it occurred to me that in all of these cases, a bad judgment does factor in somewhere. And then I also feel like it brings people in too. People react to that title, and it makes them think, and it draws them into thinking about what is this about. And so my project, my project is paintings based on this, as I said, and I tried it before, actually, when I first found these in 2003, and it didn't really work. I did one painting and I started a couple of others, but they just weren't successful. And so when I picked it up again, like 2 years ago, I decided to do it in a different way. Like, I decided to really, instead of like, you know, going in and like I'm painting a picture from the story, like it's a comic book or something, I decided to bring these characters into the living world of my paintings. And so really using all of this real evidence that I have, but putting it into my imagination and then seeing what that produces. And what I also did is I created a structure around it, because I was getting so many ideas and there's so much content in here. And then I had all this other content that I was getting really confused. And it was really important for me to make good paintings. And so what I decided to do is this structure. So I decided to do 3 paintings per case. And I did 1 large and 2 small per case. And that really helped me rein me in, so I could just connect deeply with each painting and make sure each painting was, you know, so I could go into each one and do what I do with paintings, you know, get to know the details. The painting starts communicating with me, and so I feel like that's been a pretty successful formula as I've gone on with this. I've been doing it for about 2 years. And so I've done 3 cases. So I have 9 paintings in the Museum of Bad Judgment. And so I'm going to show them all to you today. And I feel like the way I did it, they stand on their own too. You don't need to know the backstory of them, but it's kind of interesting to know them. And the other reason my method of kind of bringing them into my world is, otherwise, it's pretty heavy stuff. It's pretty depressing content. I mean, it's about murder and crime, and you know, which is interesting to me. But sometimes it would be really depressing to be, you know, focusing on this stuff all the time. But I feel like if I bring them into my painting, it's more like I'm honoring the people who died and honoring their lives and you know, hopefully they think that's okay. But so the first case was, so I'm just going to go through these cases really quick. The first one was the State versus Richard Layton, and my grandfather was the district attorney in the 40s in Polk County, which is a small county in Oregon. And I'm just going to read you the first paragraph of this case, because it will give you an idea of his writing style and why it kind of stopped me in my tracks. So Layton was a big, fat, stupid derelict of a man who somehow got himself employed by the mayor of the city of Monmouth as chief of police. The Monmouth police force consisted of 1 officer only, and he had the title of chief of police. I convicted him of murdering a Dallas High School's girl named Ruth Hildebrand by causing her death while attempting to rape her. Ruth lived with her mother and brother and sister on the bank of Rickreall Creek in Dallas. She was an excellent swimmer. This became important in the trial because if she had not been knocked unconscious by a blow to the head, she would have swum out after Layton knocked her into the river. And so this painting is called Rickreall Creek, and I just imagine that to be her, and this is the creek, and then her brother and sister. This one is from the case, is called J.C. Penney, and that was part of the evidence of the case. So she shopped at J.C. Penney, some of the clothing that was found. And then this one is actually one of the most recent paintings I've done, and this is called A Short But Important Journey, or A Small But Important Journey. And I feel like and part of this case was she took the bus to Camp Adair, which is a place where the soldiers were training for World War II. And so she took the bus from this little town, then got a ride back from the policeman, and that's when the crime happened. But so this is her waiting for the bus, but I put her into this other world and I gave her a dog and all this stuff. But I really like the way this turned out. And this is a large painting. This is about 60 inches wide and about 60 by 48, I think it is. And I just added this, they covered this in this weird detective magazine. I found this in his files, but this is a article about the case and about the girl. But these magazines are really weird. I didn't, but they were written like by men, for men back in the day. This is from the 40s. So I just thought that was interesting. The next case was called was Marjorie Smith, and she was accused. Basically, it was a woman or a man was murdered when his car exploded in the parking lot of Columbia Edgewater Country Club in Portland, and it was a big deal because it was a fancy country club. And his wife was accused of hiring a hitman to do it. And my grandfather got her acquitted, and it was kind of a big deal. That's him right there in this picture. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but so it was quite a big deal back in the day. And this one is one of the pieces of evidence was pussy willows, and they became kind of central because they supposedly put the dynamite in the car when they went up to get these pussy willows in Ridgefield, Washington, which is just north of Portland. And so that's my picture of her gathering pussy willows. This one's just called In Florida because there's just one small line in there about her, and she had another lover, and they took a trip to Florida and talked about moving there, but they didn't end up doing that. But this is how I pictured them. And then this is the one that this is almost like I'm illustrating the story, but this is his car and him walking to his car from the club. And I, of course, embellish the details and stuff, and this is a large painting that's about 50 by 48 or so. And it's called Columbia Edgewater, which was the country club that he was murdered at. And then this is the actual car. This is the picture of the car when, after that happened, after the dynamite. So it was quite, I found that on the internet somewhere. And I knew that it was a Buick because I could tell, and that's how I did the painting. But other than that, I kind of went out of my head. The next case was Vera Rasa, and that happened in the 60s, and it was another case about a woman who was accused of murdering her husband by poisoning him. And I took this picture in high school, but they were in a serious accident on the highway between the Dalles and Portland, and that's what this picture is of. But he had a heart attack while they were driving, and she was accused of murdering him by I don't know, and then covering it up with the car accident. And so so this was one of the paintings from that. This is called Oregon Service Station, and one of the witnesses in the case was a service station operator, and so I kind of did this as a little tribute to him. He had to talk about the timing of when she stopped by the service station. And I also put a little bonus painting up here. I call it a bonus painting, but I love to separate the paintings and do a different scene. This one is from that. There was a part in the story where they stop at a rest stop, and he goes into the bathroom, and they were drinking beer in the car. And so that's just an illustration of that. Again, I don't know that she looked like that, but let's see. Oh, and then this is the large painting from that. And they described that they had two sons, and there was one that was married and one who was in high school still. And after she was accused of this crime, she attempted suicide and very nearly died. And so I just thought about that boy in high school and how lonely that must have been, because your father's dead and your mother is, in the hospital. And I just thought how lonely he was. And so I did this little painting of the son. Actually, it's a pretty big painting. This painting is about 50 by 48. And but I just did that as a sort of a tribute to that son and being in that situation. And this one's called Sherwood High, and it's oil on canvas. And so those are the paintings that I have done. The last case that the current one that I'm working on right now is about a case out in John Day, Oregon, where it was sort of a high noon conflict over a piece of property. And, these ranchers, one rancher shot his brother-in-law. And so we just went out there last month and explored, so I get some visual reference. And so this is right where it happened. We were able to drive to just about close to where it happened. And this is the John Day country of Oregon. It's called Fox Valley. And so I just added some photographs because I don't have any paintings of that yet. Oh, I do. Actually, I did a little practice painting here. This is just from one of the newspaper articles. And I just did this a couple of weeks ago, but in acrylic. It's very small, but I've been doing this thing where I'm doing these lettering just freehand and just on the first try. And I kind of like the way they turned out sort of crooked like that. But that's my grandfather in the middle there. And there he is and me. I just added this one just very recently. That's him and me in 1970. He's been gone for a long time, but I feel like he's kind of still with me because I'm really delving into all of this stuff about his life and his career. And this is just a scene of my studio. I'm working on a big painting. I just started it of that John Day country, and there's going to be a horse in it, as you can see, but this is just sort of a scene of my studio. And the great thing about my studio is it's got these high walls. It's got 14-foot high walls which happen for various reasons. It was designed that way, but it turned out it's great to have such high walls. There's something about it because the footprint of it's pretty small, but having all that airspace really helps me with my creativity and my thinking. And it's got great light. And this is kind of a scene of it in the afternoon. And this is just some little ones that I've been working on here. And that's it from the outside. That's the front of my studio. And that's about all I have. I hope I didn't go too fast.
That was really fabulous, Julia.
Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing your practice with us and your process. Really fascinating and compelling talk. And we already have some questions in the chat, but just before that, I wanted to say, I wanted to let you know that how many positive and wonderful comments are coming from the audience today, saying how much they love your work. So I just want you to know that. We do have a couple of questions from Wilhelmina Tax, and the first one, all right, I'll ask them in order. The first one is, when did you start selling your artwork?
I started selling it actually in college. That big painting with the wolf with the earth in its belly, I sold that to Barry Sanders. Remember, he was the professor, and I sold that to Barry. And I sold a smaller piece from that show. But I think that those were the first pieces I ever sold were at Pitzer.
Great, thank you. And the second question from Wilhelmina Tax is, how do you think the study of psychology impacts your artwork/creative instincts?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I think it really does, because my interest in psychology is really about, human behavior, obviously. And with this, my paintings have this kind of moodiness, and they do have like a psychological element to them. And so, yeah, I think that my interest in that, and it definitely lends itself to this, to the Museum of Bad Judgment paintings, for sure. Just the interest in, what would drive people to do that and make those decisions. And but yeah, that's a great question. It really does have an impact on it. And in the subsequent years, since Pitzer, I've had a lot of different jobs, and I have worked in kind of behavioral health type of atmospheres. So has always been an interest of mine.
So I actually have a question for you, Julia.
Sure.
I was interested, I love the subject matter of the work that you're dealing with, the current body of work that you're dealing with right now, but also prior to that, the works that you showed depicting, abandoned hotels and malls, and, sort of stray dogs in the middle of parking lots. They have, for me, a cinematic quality about them. It's almost as if something has just happened or is just about to happen. So there's this sort of pregnant with, tension. And I'm wondering whether, film is something that you consciously, reference in your work, or whether this has come about otherwise.
I think I probably think like a filmmaker would think, and I think in a very narrative way. And so I don't really, I think that's just the way they come out because of my thought process, and not anything I'm consciously doing to make it look like a scene, but it does end up looking like that. I think with the paintings that I do, and I just showed a couple of them that have a black line and then another image in them, those remind me of like a film strip. Like there was the one of the service station that definitely has a film quality to it. But I did quite a bit of photography when I was, back when it was film, and in college, and I still do like to take photos, with cameras, and I mean with my phone too, but I have some of the old Holga camera, which is a film camera, and I do love to take photos, and so I think that kind of, my eye sort of lends itself to both things.
Thank you, Julia. And I have another question, actually. What do the animals represent in your work? Are they stand-ins for humans, or symbolic of events or emotions? Because they do seem to appear throughout your practice, for the last,
Right.
since you've been painting, actually.
Yeah, they do, and they come back. I think that they, I don't think that they represent other people. I think that it's more of kind of a sort of a spiritual, sort of like particularly with that blue deer, how it keeps coming back, and I paint it in the same way, not purposely. And just the way I paint them, and I paint them, and I have to do it until it looks exactly right. And so I feel like that's kind of more of a, it's coming from some sort of other realm than just my brain. And so, yeah, I think that it's really they're almost like, I know it sounds kind of weird to say spirit animals, but they've always been they've always been part of my work ever since I was a little kid. And so I am glad to kind of bring them in when I can. You know, like the last couple, or that big painting I did of the girl in the bus station, for some reason, I just like put that dog in there, just, you know, and it made me feel better. I felt like I was sort of a protector for her.
And I'm just going to read a couple of comments. Maybe you want to reflect on or comment on them. There's a comment from Charles Fraccia, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. And this is in response to your Museum of Bad Judgment. And I can't remember which painting he was actually referring to. Maybe he can tell us. But he says, I'm glad that you did this. Yes, they also did them for fraud cases too. This is fascinating. It's an interesting reflection of guilt and innocence. Wow. So perhaps, Charles, you can let us know which painting you were referring to, and maybe Julia, you could comment.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what painting he was talking about, but I think that yeah, I mean, I think that kind of looking at really getting into these cases, it makes me kind of look closer at you know, really look at all the different people involved, and I get to read the case statements, and you know, really get to know these cases in a different way. Like before, some of the really famous ones were really just family lore before, like this big one about Marjorie Smith, about the car that blew up at the bus station. Like I had not the car that blew up at the country club. Like I have a bunch of letters that were written to him after that case was done. And you know, all these people who are like really against what he had done and think that she's the devil. And, you know, so I got this really well-rounded image of what happened. I mean, I feel really lucky to have found all of that stuff, you know, and be able to be interacting with it.
Thank you, Julia. And if I may just ask another question about your painting style. For me, it is reminiscent of Henri Rousseau's, you know, very stylized, quasi-naive work. And I'm just wondering, and also, you know, he of course uses a lot of animals in his work. Yeah. So and I loved that drawing that you showed of the tiger when you were going through your scientific course, because that tiger really, really reminded me of an Henri Rousseau painting. And so I'm wondering whether you can talk a little bit about your influences and whether Henri Rousseau is part of that.
Yeah, you know, I think as a young painter, he was definitely one of my influences, and Franz Marc, you know, the Blaureiter period or school, those paintings, those German painters. Franz Marc is the only one I can remember, but I loved his. And so kind of as a young painter, those were really influential. Now I'm influenced by Ben Shahn is a big influence for me. And he's been an influence for a long time. There's a painter named Carol Clore, who is a Southern American painter, and he's a man, and I believe it's Cloar, Carol Clore. I'm picturing my bookshelf in my studio, because I have a bookshelf of different painters that I refer to when I get stuck. Like, how would they do a sky? How would they do the water? And William Cumming is one of them, who's a Seattle artist. Faye Jones, who's a Seattle artist, is a big influence, because she's just bizarre. Like, if ever I think like I want my paintings getting a little too constricted, I start looking at her work, and it's just really dreamlike. Another one is John Register is a big influence on me, and he was a California painter. He died in 98, but he was a huge influence on me when I was doing those early motel paintings. And he's just wonderful. And I didn't have a slide of it, but I did this painting it was of a foot of a bed and a dresser and a mirror. And then I had a chance to see this retrospective of his in Seattle. And the last painting of it was of a bed, a motel bed, a dresser, and a mirror. I had just done that painting and I couldn't believe it. And so I felt like I had this kind of, psychic connection with him. He had died by that point, but yeah, that was like in '99. But yeah, right now, Carol Clore is a big one. Some of these kind of more folk artists like Horace Pippin is one of my influences. Oh, I can't think of any more, but that's a pretty good list.
Thank you, Julia, for that. Charles Fraccia has just asked. He said he didn't remember which painting it was that we were talking about, but do you think that the Bad Judgment series has an influence now in American society?
What? Say the question again.
Does the Museum of Bad Judgment series have an influence now in terms of what's going on in American society?
That's funny that you talk about that, because I have that, like, I feel like this Museum of Bad Judgment could kind of expand to be more things. And so right now, for me, the Museum of Bad Judgment is a series of paintings based on these cases. But I feel like it could expand to be more things. And like I have this total fantasy about having a gallery or a space that's called the Museum of Bad Judgment, where other artists could show stuff and people could, show, could come and gather and, talk about things like this. I mean, Bad Judgment, it's just like that thread you could pull it so far. So yeah, I thought about doing it in different things, and I actually I have the domain, the museumofbadjudgment.com, just in case I want to do anything else with it. But yeah, I mean, I feel like it definitely could ring true and inspire other ideas. I don't have anything specific because I'm trying to focus on what I'm doing, but I do have that in my mind for when I'm finished with this.
Thank you, Julia. I love the idea of creating not only a website, but also a space that can continue to grow and evolve and have different, participants. We almost
I live in Tacoma, Washington, and I feel like that Tacoma would be a really good place to do something like that. So.
Yeah. Well, please keep us informed.
Oh yeah.
So we're actually coming up to the very end of the discussion, but I just want to ask a question by Kim Hudson.
Yeah.
And Kim asks, have you considered submitting your paintings to Crystal Bridges Museum?
I haven't. I'll have to look into that. I have them all right now. I'm have kind of this big body of work, and so I'm always considering different things. So I'll have to look into that. And I guess I'll just say that I stay pretty current with. I try to write in my blog once a month, and then I stay pretty current with what I'm doing on Instagram, and which is Julia W. White 253, and so if people wanted to kind of follow other stuff that I'm doing, they could do that. But okay, I see that chat from Kim. Great, thank you.
Well, thank you again so much, Julia. It's been really fascinating. And as you can see from all of the chat, people love your work. So please keep in touch with us. Let us know what you're doing.
Yeah, I definitely will. And I'll let you know what I have coming up. And I also just want to point out, I see my cousin Mary is here. So it's her grandfather too. So hi, Mary. Okay, well, thank you so much. This was so fun.
Well, and for us too.
Yay. Thanks everybody for coming. Good to see you, Liz, and everybody.
Bye, Emily. Bye, Julia.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.